how do you know when it's time to quit a video game? Last year, I made a video about how to get back into a game that you'd stopped playing, and it became my most watched video by a long shot. The message seemed to resonate with many gamers, but not everyone agreed with the premise. Some viewers argued that if you're not motivated to play, you should just quit the game and move on. Now, I don't think this is a bad take. I even touched on it in the original video. But I do think it misses something deeper, because games aren't just entertainment. They can challenge us, teach us, and even stay with us long after we stop playing. Those comments did get me thinking though. How do you know when you've spent enough time with the video game? How do you know when to move on? That's what we're going to explore today. I'll break down why this question is so hard for gamers, and then share a simple visual tool to help you decide when to keep going and when to quit. Before we try to answer our question of when to quit a game, we need to talk about structure and abundance. When you watch a movie, the end is crystal clear. Screen fades to black, credits roll, and you move on. Games aren't like that. Modern games are built to be open-ended, packed with side content, alternate endings, bonus unlocks, and achievements. And this isn't just RPGs either, this is most genres. Much of the time, this extra content is added with good intentions. I do think developers want to offer more value to players in most cases, but that abundance can backfire because it blurs the natural stopping point for the player. And with live service and multiplayer games, things get even messier. These games are built to keep you coming back, driven by constant updates that put the finish line just out of reach. At almost any point within a game, you could make a case for continuing to play it. This is even true for narrative-driven, single-player games, the closest thing we have to a movie. Take the recent Indiana Jones title. After the credits roll, you'll still be tempted. Did you complete all the side quests? Solve that final mystery? Try it on a harder difficulty? If Indy was the only game that you owned, great. But in 2025, we're not in a time of scarcity. We're in an era of gaming surplus. And that abundance creates its own problem. Too many games, but not enough time. This is why it's so important for players to find the Goldilocks zone within their games. The point where you've played just the right amount. Not too little, and not too much. When you hit that sweet spot, you can walk away feeling really good about the time you spent with the game. But if you miss it, you risk two undesirable outcomes. On one end, you might give up on a game that could actually enrich your life. And on the other end, you might waste precious time on something not worth your attention. So those are the stakes. But how do we actually figure out what just right looks like? Oddly enough, we're gonna borrow a concept from a business and strategy writer. In 2007, Seth Godin published a short book called The Dip. He kicks things off with a quote from legendary football coach Vince Lombardi. "Quitters never win, and winners never quit." Sounds exactly like some shit my high school coaches would say. But Seth pushes back. Bad advice, he says. Winners quit all the time. They just quit the right stuff at the right time. This is one of those statements that you just know to be true as soon as you hear it, because we've all been there. Maybe you stuck with World of Warcraft for too much of your life. Or maybe you dropped Red Dead Redemption 2 before seeing the end of Arthur's saga, and now you kind of wish you hadn't. Both are symptoms of the same issue, not knowing when to quit. So what is Seth's solution to this problem? It all comes down to figuring out which part of this curve you're currently riding. He calls this graph the dip, which plots the amount of time you spend on something with the results you get back. At first, progress feels fast and rewarding. Then you hit a stretch where things slow down, frustration builds, and the returns start to drop off. That is the dip. Almost every worthwhile pursuit has this shape, whether you're learning the tuba, growing a landscaping business, or just trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. Pushing through the dip will reward you with a steep curve of growth, but if you quit too early, you miss the payoff. Seth's key insight is this: the dip is a filter. Most people hit it, stall out, and then give up. But if you can recognize it for what it is, you actually get to make a conscious choice. Buckle in and ride it out, or walk away before you get in too deep. Now, what does this curve have to do with video games? Well, before it'll make sense, we need to make a slight adjustment to the graph to make it sound less like corpo speak. Instead of results, we're going to swap that label out for a better word that I used earlier: enrichment. Why enrichment? Because it represents all the positive outcomes we could get from a game. As I said in the intro, it's not just about entertainment value. While that is important, games can mean so much more than that. So we want to make sure we account for those possibilities. With that change, the question becomes, does this curve reflect the experience of playing a video game? For many games and many players, it absolutely does. I bet most of you can think of a game you've played that followed this exact curve. In fact, put the title of that game down in the comments so everyone can see. For me, that game was Halo 3. If you only played Halo 3 for the campaign, maybe dabbled a bit in the multiplayer, this is roughly where you'd exit the curve, just before the dip. And that's totally cool. It's a perfectly viable way to play the game. But I got hooked. I didn't care that I was terrible at shooters and losing most of my matches. I just wanted to keep playing. Now, at some point while I was drifting through the dip, I made a discovery. I found this niche community of players who used alternative tactics, essentially hiding spots and map exploits, to gain the upper hand in matches. It was hilarious, creative, and I fell in love. It even led me to create my first YouTube channel, posting hiding videos for other players. Becoming part of that community was my payoff. It was my climb out of the dip. And to be honest, it kills me to think about how much I would have lost out on if I had quit early. By the time I reached the dip, my connection with Halo 3 was strong enough to keep me going, and I was rewarded with something truly meaningful on the other side. But here's the thing, for the average player, it just wouldn't be worth it to hang on that long. Not every game deserves that level of commitment from you. Let's look at a different Bungie shooter. I tried to get into Destiny. You can imagine how much I wanted to like those games. But after 25 or 30 hours between Destiny 1 and 2, I realized that getting deeper into Destiny was probably not going to enrich my life like Halo did. I want to be clear. Thousands of players have had incredible experiences with Destiny. For them, pushing through the dip was worth it. It just so happened that for me, it wasn't. And that brings us to a key point in this video. For most players, in most games, the optimal quitting point is before the dip. This is what Godin calls a good quitting point, because you get the benefits of the early part of the curve, but you don't actually waste time in the slump that follows. Now, every once in a while, you will find that rare game where the payoff is worth the push. For me, Halo 3 was one of them. But if I had to ballpark it, I would say this was the case for less than 10% of the games I've played. Most of the time, I was better off moving on to something else. Not because the games were bad, but because the probability of that payoff was too low to justify the commitment. So if we follow Seth's logic, that means my optimal quitting point for those games came before reaching the dip. Okay, great. Let's say you do intend to drop a game before hitting this point. How do you know when you're getting close? In well-paced games, the dip does often follow the completion of the main story or objective. By that point, you've seen the core mechanics, wrapped up the plot to some degree, and likely feel a sense of closure. But as I mentioned earlier, clean endings like this are becoming less common. So most likely, to find the dip, you're going to need to rely on your own signals. The clearest indicator is a consistent drop in enjoyment. If you go 2 or 3 play sessions in a row and you find yourself having less and less fun each time, you're probably heading straight for the dip. And remember, the exact location of the dip isn't fixed. It might come sooner for you and later for me. That just depends on our individual tastes, goals, and tolerance. Now let's talk about the harder call, knowing when to hang on. How can you tell if a game is actually worth pushing through the dip for? There's no formula for this one. It's usually going to come down to something you feel. But there are questions you can ask yourself to help bring that feeling into focus. The first question I would ask is, do you feel deeply compelled to keep playing this game? Not just in a might as well kind of way, but something stronger, something that keeps tugging at you even when you're off doing other things. That kind of subconscious pull is worth paying attention to. Another powerful question is, would you mourn the absence of this game in your life? If you woke up tomorrow and found out you were never allowed to play it again, would you feel a sense of loss? It might sound dramatic, but some games do leave a mark, and I bet most of you know what I'm talking about. Finally, it's worth stepping back and looking beyond the game itself. Has it already brought something else good into your life? Maybe it's sparked your creativity. Maybe it's introduced you to a community or helped you reconnect with a part of yourself. Maybe there's a character or a story beat or a piece of music that hit you at just the right time. All of those things are signs that the game might still have more to offer, and that pushing through the dip could be worth it. Of course, not all reasons to keep playing are good ones, and one of the worst reasons, the one that trips up many of us, is this: I've already spent so much time on it. This is the sunk cost fallacy, plain and simple. And if you've been around this channel, you've heard me bring it up before. The time you've already spent, that's gone. It can't be recovered, and it shouldn't play any role in your decision to keep going. What should matter is what the game still has to offer. If you're just grinding away because you feel like you have to, not because you want to, then you've already answered your own question. Here's a little trick that might help. Imagine you woke up with amnesia. Total memory wipe. You don't know how many hours you've put into the game, how much loot you've collected, or how far you've leveled your character. Now, look at your options with fresh eyes. You have a library of games in front of you, this one included. But which one would you choose to play next? That thought experiment can help to cut through the noise. It clears out the baggage and gets you back to the real question. Does this game give me the best potential for enrichment? By this point, I hope the dip curve is starting to make sense. But before we wrap, I do need to mention one other curve that Seth talks about in the book, and it can be just as important. It's called the cul-de-sac. Unlike the dip, where things might get better if you push through, the cul-de-sac is like a loop. You can keep going forever, but nothing really changes. No growth, no deeper payoff. If you find yourself stuck on this kind of curve, you should quit. There's no upside waiting for you around the bend. A recent example of a cul-de-sac game for me was Forza Motorsport. This game was hyped up as a car PG, something that really interests me. While I did enjoy the feel of the racing, after 7 or 8 hours, there was still no sign of a hook. My satisfaction with the game wasn't growing. This is where a personal time threshold comes in handy. Maybe it's 2 hours, maybe 5. For me, I will give a game a max of 8 hours to prove something to me, which I know is generous, but it works for how I play. Set whatever limit feels right for you within reason. If the enjoyment levels don't rise by that point, you know what to do. Just make sure you're checking in with yourself early enough to make a clean exit if things aren't clicking. All right, here's what I hope you walk away from this video with. In today's gaming landscape, we have access to more games than ever, but not enough time to play them all. That means quitting isn't just okay, it's strategic. Most games you play will follow the dip curve. Enrichment starts high, then gradually declines. If your enjoyment keeps dropping over a few sessions, you're probably heading into the dip. And for most games, that's your cue to quit. But some games, rare ones, deliver something extra on the other side of that slump. If a game is enriching your life, pulling you back in, or offering real emotional value, that might be your signal to stick with it. A couple closing tips. Don't fall for the sunk cost trap. Time already spent shouldn't factor into your decision. Focus on the next hour, not the last. And watch out for the cul-de-sac. If a game stays flat for too long with no upward momentum, it's not the dip, it's a dead end. Quit the games that aren't serving you, stick with the ones that matter. And try to spend most of your time in that sweet spot where enrichment is real and the experience feels just right. All right, folks, that is all I have for you today. I hope this was interesting. I had a lot of fun putting it together, and it's definitely clarified my own approach to quitting. If you did learn something or you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Take care, y'all. I'll see you guys in the next one.